We've got Brandon Grindle in today, kind of went through his story, how he got here. And I thought actually the whole podcast kind of hit another level when he started talking about current events there towards the end also. So it's been awesome. It was one of the longer ones we've done. We loved it. I mean, so much so that when we got done, everybody kind of clapped. So it was great. Think you'll like it. We are live. I'm really excited about today. I'm excited about what we're going to do. And here's why. I know Brandon Grindle a little bit, but I really, honestly, we haven't known each other for very long. We've been talking about wanting to get together and do something similar to this just at lunch or something. Like, let's get together when I get back.
Right.
Weird circumstances that have brought us to this point, but I'm actually excited just because I really don't know. Like, there's so much of your story that I want to get to anyway. So
I appreciate it.
Brandon Grindle, welcome to whatever this is.
Thank you.
So we met about when was it?
Well,
November?
Yeah, October, November-ish, somewhere around there.
How do you, because I wasn't there for how it unfolded because I was already in Arizona.
Yeah.
Steve Stone, a buddy of mine from Texas, calls
Right.
and he goes, "Hey, do you know Brandon Grindle?" And I said, "No." And I feel like I should have lied. Here's why. Because he's like, "Oh, he said he's been going to your church for like 2 years."
Yeah.
But you had connected with Steve. You go to the church here.
Yep.
You had connected with my buddy Steve in Texas based on a podcast him and I had done together.
Right.
And he was talking about what he's doing in Belize.
Yep.
You had, stop me if I'm getting the details wrong, you had called him about getting involved in that. We'll get to all the details there.
Okay.
Steve said, "You got to know this guy." So actually, you got introduced to me from a buddy in Texas that's never even been here.
Or met me. Yeah, correct.
Exactly. So when I called you, that was I think the bummer for me is I was like, "Have we met?" And you're like, "Well, I've been there for." I mean, how long have you been around?
So today marks 3 years of moving back here, and I started going to this church probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah. So we should have known each other by now. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that at a selfish level, this has been one of the coolest things we've done because it allows me to get to know people better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more I do this, the more I realize like there's just so many people I don't really know very well yet.
Right. I mean, my attendance was somewhat sporadic at that time, or, for the first year I lived here, and then I started going more consistently once my parents moved here about 2 years ago.
So you got here before they did?
I did, yeah.
Where did you move here from?
So I moved here from SoCal, and the way I got into Central Oregon was my aunt and uncle moved here in 91. They moved to Bend, and so they have a house right on the river. And as we got older as kids, I have two older sisters, our parents would leave us up here for, at first it was like kind of a family trip. And then as we got older, they would just let us come up for about a month, and we would just hang with my aunt and uncle all summer, and then I moved here in 2008, 2009. Everything took a dive.
Right.
And, I didn't have a whole lot of skills. I was fresh out of high school, knew customer service and a little bit of carpentry skills through my dad.
Yeah.
And then that's when I moved back to SoCal, and then joined the Marine Corps, went to college, and then so on and so forth.
How old are you now?
I'm 30. I just turned 30 in January.
And so you kind of knew you wanted to end up in this part of the world.
Well, so when I moved back, I was planning on being a firefighter. Like when I first moved here, I was in fire classes and EMT classes at COCC. I moved back to SoCal. I continued.
We're at there.
So I grew up in Dana Point in South Orange County, and then I was going to school in Santa Ana at Santa Ana City College. They have a good fire program there.
And your folks were living, that's where they're at.
Correct. So my dad went through the Santa Ana fire program, and then they're two separate entities, but he got hired on with Santa Ana Fire Department. It's not like a lot of fire departments in SoCal, like LA City, or you've seen the reality show they used to have for Orange County Fire, but you don't go through Santa Ana School Academy and then automatically you have a job.
Oh, okay.
So it was just coincidental that my dad ended up working in the same city as the school, and they're somewhat affiliated, but not directly.
So, like in that part of the world, everything's just crazy expensive, right?
As far as housing goes, yeah, there's a lot of similarities to Bend. I mean, normal cost of living is not significantly higher if you take out the housing situation.
Okay.
You know
All
what I'm
right.
saying?
So when everything kind of took a dive here in 08, 09, you were going to do what? When you came, what was the plan when you got here for the first time?
So the first time I was just going to go to school, try and become a firefighter up here. I mean, this was like the destination. I wanted to get out of SoCal. I grew up on the beach, but I also grew up in the mountains a lot. My dad lived in Mammoth for 10 years. He built log homes and he skied. So we've always kind of been this like,
Are you a skier?
I snowboard. Yeah. So we've always been this kind of mixed family of like, we're beach people, but we love the outdoors and we know how to build a house kind of thing. So
Perfect spot.
yeah. So I decided to move up here, and that was the goal: go to college, become a firefighter, white picket fence. I had a high school sweetheart at home. I left her there, said, I'll go to school, I'll get hired, you come up, we'll get married, And then everything took a dive up here, and it was just tough. I didn't have a strong network. I had some family up here, but not a whole lot of.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 18. I was just
so that's
a kid.
I mean, there's nobody has a network at 18.
Right.
I mean, that's an impossible standard. I mean, it makes sense that if everything falls apart at 18, you don't have the means to ride it out.
Absolutely. So I just, I tanked, and I moved back to SoCal, and then went back to school to be a firefighter. And then so the way that I ended up in the Marine Corps was, to get into the fire department is kind of like trying to break into a top secret group. They have to really like you. It's not, I mean, and I'm not going to speak for all firefighters in this way or anything like that. But they're very specific, at least down in SoCal, of who they want to bring on.
Was it actually being a firefighter that you were excited about, or just the dependability of the income?
It was more so the dependability, because I saw my dad do it.
Yeah.
And so, when I say they're, selective, one of the criteria is they want to be surrounded by other men who have similar skill sets and interests. I'm like this 19-year-old kid. And so I went to my buddy's boot camp graduation. He was my best friend in high school, and I went to his boot camp graduation in San Diego for the Marines. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool.
Do you think that they caused that environment at a graduation to seem cooler than the actual experience, so that when people come to see their families, they see it all and they're like more likely to enlist?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it probably plays a part in it, but the Marine Corps traditions are pretty exceptional regardless of the venue. So like when you go to the Marine Corps ball, it's pretty much all Marines and their spouses or significant others. And, it's still a production, and all the marching and the drill movements and the swords. So I think that's more just ingrained in the tradition of the Marine Corps. I don't think necessarily it is specifically to recruit, but it doesn't hurt.
It seems like to me that of all the people I know with military backgrounds, everybody is like, I was in the military, except for Marines. If you're a Marine, you are specifically a Marine. That's the only group, and I've never been involved, but it seems like that's the one group that they don't just identify it as military general. It seems like that is a specific point of pride.
Yeah, I think so. And, that's...
Hold on. I skipped because I want to go back. You said that you started... I'm skipping way ahead. Let's go back. You went to your buddy's graduation.
Yep.
And you're kind of trying to figure this out. The fire department is already kind of a difficult road.
Right. So, so I was going to get in the fire department, and then I go to my buddy's graduation as I'm still in school to become a firefighter. And... I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And so he had joined with a reserve contract, and he was going to be a heavy equipment operator. And so the way that the reserves work is you have to have a unit within 100 miles of your home of record, and then they have to find you a job specifically for that unit, right? So you get to pick your MOS, essentially, your military specialty. So he picked heavy equipment. So I was like, this is pretty cool. And then the wheels kind of started turning in my head. And I just felt like I was still a kid trying to become a firefighter around all these men. I mean, I felt like I was mature for my age, but I wasn't quite.
Life experience.
Yeah, I didn't have the life experience and the skills. And I just felt like I needed to grow up. And it was, so I went and
Well, and that can be a lot of work, I would think, from the fire department standpoint. That would be a lot of work to have people that you spend that much time with. You're there with them all day on the days you're on. To have a young kid that hasn't had the life experience, to some degree, I could understand that. Of like,
oh, absolutely. And I'm not being critical of the fire department. I just want to make sure that's clear. I mean, my dad was a firefighter.
No, I don't feel like anybody would have thought that. I just mean, it's probably to everybody's benefit that you thought, maybe I'd come back to that later.
Yeah, absolutely. But then comes kind of the paradigm as, once I was in the Marine Corps, it's just a melting pot of people from different, demographics and socioeconomic groups, and yet everybody's green. So I started to see that, didn't feel that same type of conflict or pressure as I did trying to become a firefighter and fit into that box.
Right.
And I was like, this is really cool. So
Everybody's almost starting at 0 rather than you're at 0 and everybody else is at 100.
yeah, absolutely. You're kind of in it together, especially as you're in the lower ranks, because everybody, you know, you're private, PFC, whatever, and you're kind of just figuring everything out and you're suffering together. And I think that's where a lot of that cohesion comes from. Let
me ask you something. Do you think that people are either kind of geared for it or against it as far as the discomfort of it? Here's what I mean by that. It seems like I've got friends that are just okay with discomfort. They're okay with things that are difficult. It's like they're just naturally okay with it. And I have other friends that I just, in my wildest imagination, I cannot imagine them going through some of those difficult situations and being okay. Not saying one's better or not saying one's worse, but in your experience, does it feel like there are people that are just kind of geared that way naturally for the difficulties of that?
Yeah, I do. And I think the people that can absorb the blows of those difficult times, and then they can see a bigger picture, or they can see the finish line or some type of destination they've put in front of themselves. Those are the people that typically thrive. So
real quick, you said that when you came to Oregon, you were thinking white picket fence. So you're already seeing a finish line even at 18. You're looking at the fire department and your finish line is like, I'm just not maybe at a place like what you talked about, but there's already a finish line there. Now you're saying the military, the people who already see the finish. So like already what you're saying is that in your mind, tell me if you think I'm right, you're already just naturally always thinking about what's next. Like, where is this headed? Why is this important? Where is it going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, joining the Marine Corps is a really big decision. So when I joined, and I still laugh about it today, actually, when I joined, I picked heavy equipment too. And the reason why was so that I would have another skill outside of the Marine Corps. So, and I was planning on still becoming a firefighter. So I joined the reserves. So I was going to, as soon as I finished my training, I was going to come back. And
isn't there, if you had a military background, isn't that like automatically give you a better rank with the fire department also?
Yeah. So I took that into account in my decision making, and then, with the heavy equipment. But people said, why'd you choose heavy equipment? I said, well, maybe one day I'll open my own heavy equipment business. And I never believed myself when I said that, but it seemed like a safe answer at 20 years old when I joined. Now here I am, I do have a heavy equipment business. So I always chuckle about it in my head when I think of that.
I feel like when I look back on my life, there are things I now only in retrospect understand that like what I thought was actually a decision that I was making was God just sort of taking me where I would need to go. And I think that's part of what allows me to be at peace a lot of times, even at 37, is like, I think back to the stress, for instance, like at 20 years old, I had the stress of like, am I picking the right one?
Right.
God's got this way of just like, okay, we're going to go through this. You think it's your choice. You think you're the one doing it. And now you look back and you're like, okay, God just kind of put me exactly where I need to be.
Yeah. And, I mean, whenever you want to jump into the Steve Stone story, I can kind of bounce back into that.
Let's get there in just a second, because I want to know, because when we started talking, so much of what had led you to that point was what caused you to pick up the phone and call Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to know, like, before we get to that part of it, so you're in the military, heavy equipment is kind of the point of focus.
Yeah. So then I went back to school, and I decided to get my bachelor's degree. And I had decided I didn't want to be a firefighter. So now,
what changed?
I liked that the Marine Corps didn't care about certain things. It wasn't as personal in the Marine Corps. Like, I didn't care if I could live with you. I didn't care what kind of TV shows you watch or what your personal interests were. I just wanted to make sure you could do your job well and you have my back.
The practicality.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that a lot about the Marine Corps, and I really took a lot of pride in being in the Marine Corps. And so, like with the reserves, a common misconception is that the reserves is just something you do, 2 days a month, and you go down there, you put your uniform on, and you play Marine. And for some people, it could be. For me, I was fortunate enough to get into a lot of leadership positions, and so I was doing Marine Corps just about 31 days a month. It was, and as soon as I got into leadership roles, I'm sending emails every day. I'm doing phone calls. Oh, so and so got in a car accident. I got to call, the next guy above me. And so it just became part of my lifestyle.
Did you see yourself as a leader before that?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, I've always been the type of person that if I saw something wrong, I'd stand up and say something. Or if we were in, group exercises in grade school, I probably would step up if I thought I could contribute. But I had never been in any real official leadership position.
So did this just kind of feel like a natural progression of like, of course I'd be in a position of leadership. Now there's just a validation of what you kind of felt like was always there? Or was it, because one of the things that I see a lot, especially because the early 20s, is the imposter syndrome. Somebody starts to kind of catch some momentum and they go, I don't feel like I belong here. Yeah. Were you having any of that, or did it feel like a natural fit?
I don't think I ever really had the imposter syndrome or, any type of apprehension for that. But I think I've always been really critical of myself. So like I've always, as I was younger, I would get test anxiety, or like in the Marine Corps, we'd go to run a physical fitness test and I'm like, this is going to be the one that I pass out, because I had to do good as a leader. Right. Yeah. And so as long as I could maintain that personal validation through my actions, I was okay with it. So I don't think I ever had like the fear of the imposter syndrome, but I definitely was hypercritical of myself.
You said it, that it's about being able to ring the bell. You don't care what somebody thinks. You don't care what they do. It's not about a personal interaction. It's, can you ring the bell for the job?
Right.
And if that's the case, then that could probably be said about you too. Of like, if you can validate that, hey, I'm doing the job they asked me to do, then all the other stuff is just almost a distraction. Like, as long as you're able to complete what they've asked you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was fortunate to have some solid leadership right above me. Actually, my friend that I was in high school with, and we ended up in the same unit, and he was a year ahead of me. So he was always in charge of me. And so if he was going to be hard on somebody, it was me.
Yeah.
But I always got constant, immediate feedback. And when it wasn't good, then I had, a benchmark to measure my performance to.
I'm not even sure if that's a military thing. I think that's young men. If there's like my son, Jet, he's 11. And like, he spends a lot of time around men. And one of the things I'm constantly telling him is like, hey, if somebody gets after you about something, listen. And he's amazing. He's not like he's learning it from me, but like, feedback, even if you're not in a military setting, like just in life, if you're at a job and you've got a boss that's constantly yelling, like, yeah, maybe he's a jerk, but if there's something you can pick up from that, you're going to be ahead of the game if you don't let it hurt your feelings, if you don't take it personal. Right.
And as long as the source is good, right? Like, as long as they are legitimate. And so, for me, in the Marine Corps, telling Marines, subordinate Marines, what to do, whether it was teaching them how to run heavy equipment or it was wearing their uniform properly, showing up on time, those were always things that I had to maintain the highest level. So that was always in the back of my mind. Like, I could never be late for morning muster, or my sleeves had to be rolled perfect. So those were all those things, so that if somebody was to give me pushback, I was like,
you can defend yourself.
I can defend myself. Yeah. And I see the same thing with running my business. Is I need to be able to operate heavy equipment well. I need to show up on time and do what I say, and then my employees should be able to do the same thing.
Do you know Robert Buckner? Have you met Robert?
I just talked to him on the phone on my way here, talking about the dirt.
Yeah. So Robert, one of the things that he demonstrated early on in our friendship, and you'll get to meet him, but his point is exactly the same. Like, if I'm running this crew, they need to know that I'll never ask them to do something that I won't do myself.
Exactly.
And that's a fine line, because like, as a pastor, as a leader, I have to be willing to delegate, but I also have to be willing to do whatever is the worst job. I'm willing to do whatever. Yeah. I will do whatever. But then beyond that, then there is the delegation fact of like, hey, if I try to do everything myself, I'm going to inhibit what we're able to do here.
Right.
But Robert, one of the things like Robert, I've seen him do, like, he's the first one to jump in the ditch. And what's amazing about that is everybody who's standing around, it's been me before, when he's the guy that's the boss on the job and he jumps in the ditch, everybody around him is like, oh, we should have done that. Like, if he was doing it, we should have volunteered. And like, it creates a culture. That guy's a great ability to create a culture around him of like, everybody from the top down is all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also too, when you're in that type of environment, you might have a couple potential leaders that are in that group, and so they're just becoming leaders through osmosis. They're seeing it, and that's going to get burned in their brain of like, when something difficult comes up, they're going to go, I remember when the boss jumped in the pit that day and he was up to, his waist in muddy water or whatever it is, something nasty.
Have you ever heard the saying, the best things in life are caught, not taught?
Sure.
And that's something that I've hoped, if we can set the culture, to your point, the people who are going to excel, they're going to catch those things. The people who are not going to excel, you couldn't teach them anyway. So if you're just learning by doing, the people who have a desire, like you're saying, everything you're saying is like it was from within. Like you held yourself to a high standard.
Right.
Those kind of people are going to catch those moments. People who don't or won't do that, I mean, you could put them in a classroom, they're still not going to learn it.
Yeah, I mean, when I get frustrated, if I'm trying to, give someone advice that, I think I can speak to something and, they don't do it, you just say you can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, and there's nothing wrong with that to an extent. I mean, it takes all different people to make the machine work, some are gears, some are cogs, some are the chain, there's all different pieces.
How old were you when you learned that? And let me tell you why I'm asking. I didn't learn that till later because I felt like there were people who like were going to make it and people who weren't. And for a long time, I just didn't have a tremendous amount of regard because I was so vision driven, like goal oriented. We got to get done. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just get out of the way. And I've had to, so what I'm asking is I had to circle back to like, wait a minute, everybody is a part of what goes on here equally. Yeah. Even if I don't see and I mean, that's almost embarrassing to admit because it sounds like I was just throwing people away. I don't mean that. I just didn't know how to view it as all being. So how old were you when you started to say that, hey, it takes all different kinds?
Well, see, it's hard to do that in the Marine Corps because you have specific jobs, right? Like if you're a heavy equipment operator, you're a heavy equipment operator. So I would guess that it wasn't, I don't think I really started to wrap my head around that until I started reading and listening to more entrepreneurial books and podcasts. And I started to realize that, people have certain traits, gifts, and, deficiencies, and everyone is truly different. And I think it was a few years ago, but I think what drives that is your threshold, right? And everyone has certain thresholds of pain or aspirations. Like if it's not this bad, this is how bad it has to get before I'm going to change anything. Right. I'm going to stay under the comfort blanket that I've created, and that's my reality, and I'm fine with it. And I think certain people just have really high thresholds that, they're tight thresholds to where it's like, I'm still not happy with the performance. I'm still not this, right. And so they keep kind of moving that farther and farther. And so I think once I started to realize that I had all these different levels, and every time I would get to one, I was like, okay, that's awesome, but I want to keep moving. That's when I started to realize that not everybody has the same aspirations. And a lot of people, they're okay, staying where they're at.
Their threshold is different.
Yeah, their threshold's different. And that, so I started to let things go more. Yeah. And so now, like when it comes to running a business, there's different people that you bring in, and you got the guy that wants to stay late because he is like committed, he's a lifer, or you might have the person that wants to work just 40 hours at most. And, everybody has their different, kind of desires, and that I think drives their role into an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. They're almost dictating how far they're going to progress.
Yeah.
I mean, I think occasionally you run into a boss that no matter how good a job you do, they'll be threatened by you progressing. Those people do exist for sure.
Sure.
But I think on average, everybody, as someone who has a staff also, I want everyone to continue to do well. That's what you want. Right. But I also know like that I don't get to dictate someone's level of buy-in. And I reached a point, like it was a few years ago without getting into too much detail, I reached a point where I was like, I don't want to cause harm anymore. I don't want to set the standard to meet the, like, here's something I struggle with, and we've talked before, but once it's like someone gets locked into somewhere in my mind, mm-hmm. It's not unforgiveness. It's not like I'm mad. I don't feel angry. It's just really hard when someone's like, that's hard. I don't want to do it. Man, that's hard. It's hard for me to get over that. Yep. I think I'm getting better. I hope. I guess you'd have to ask the team, but like I would like to get to a place where if somebody goes, I don't want to do something, which mm-hmm. right now to be very clear, we're so blessed with who we have right now. Our staff has been, I mean, you can look around.
Yeah.
But I mean, talking about people in the church, like they'll come to you for advice and they're like, hey, I want my marriage to get better. And you're like, okay, well then here's some things to think about. And they're like, I don't really want to. That was my hardest thing to get over. Cause I'm like, then I have nothing to offer you. I have nothing I can do to help if you're not willing to kind of take some initiative in your own life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the majority of people deal with that just in different levels, whether it's professionally or personally. You have people in your life who you might see, a lot of times being on the outside, the third party looking in, you could see the answer to someone's problem. And, if they're standing out in the rain and you give them an umbrella and they don't want to use it, how many times can you hand them the umbrella before you're exhausted and you're like, man, you're surrounded by umbrellas and yet you're still wet.
Right.
So, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, but on an organizational level, a lot of times that can come down to, in my opinion and in my experience, it's the leader's fault for not dealing with that. Yeah. So, and then if you deal with it and you're still not getting the results, but you've verbalized it, then at that point it can be on the individual. And that's a tough, line to toe there.
Well, yeah, because I don't want to let myself off the hook. If there's something that as a leader that I'm consistently seeing show up, I have to see that as my problem. If it's consistently like a group of people are all having the same issue, it's no longer their fault. So there is that balance of how much of this is on me and how much of this is on them. And I think what we're left with here, because we are such macro managers, even honestly, and I'm not even talking staff at this point, I'm talking people who find a home here. We're macro managerial, which means like one of our core values is like, you got to pedal your own bike. Like this has to matter to you as much as it matters to us. And everybody kind of as a result to I don't say survive here, but to really feel like you're home here requires that a certain level of buy-in at a personal level.
Absolutely. And I think, everyone receives information differently too. And in my experience, a lot of times I'll line somebody out on something to do and I'll come back an hour later and it has nothing to do with their skill level. There was obviously a breakdown in communication, whether it was my fault or their fault that they didn't, I asked them, do you understand? And yeah, I understand. And then you come back and it's not done right.
Have you ever seen Monty Python, Search for Holy Grail?
Yeah.
Remember that scene where he's like, you guys stay out here. And they're like, so go in? We're like, no, stay out here. And like there's the constant, like Lacey would get after me because she's like, hey, we're talking years ago. I want to be very, very clear. Like when you look around everybody that's moving here, I'm not saying this because we're live. We could not ask for a better team right now. I'm just talking about like in the beginning. And I think this is kind of what you're saying about learning to be a leader.
Yep.
Early on, I was so bad at it because I was so like, just figure it out.
Yep.
And I felt like because I wasn't communicating well, it was like, okay, you're going to stay here? Yes, I'm going to stay here. And you walk off and they follow. You're like, what is going on? Like, where is the breakdown coming from? And it was me. I was not able to consider, and I think part of it was we were building, we were growing, like we were kind of in like triage mode of like, go, 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 go. That exactly your point. I had not learned how to turn around and make sure that what I was saying was the same as what people were hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's delegation comes into that too, picking key players and saying, okay, this person has this ability. And so they're going to head up this part, and then making sure now that the communication between just you and that person is crystal clear and that they're receiving it the way that you need them to be receiving it. So then they can pass it down. Right.
So in the service, you're in an interesting position because you're in a position of leadership.
Right.
But you also answer to people above you.
Yep.
So you don't really have the ability to just go firing people. I mean, you are in it with those people, right. And it's up to you to make sure that at the end of the day, everybody is getting it done.
Yeah. So it was tricky, so when I was in boot camp, I just kind of flew under the radar. My buddy who was a year ahead of me says, just glide through boot camp, just be loud and move fast. So got it. Did that. Combat training, I'm like, this sucks. Like we were only in Southern California, but it was like fall and so cold. I mean, you're digging a fighting hole and you're standing there with your buddy and you're hugging each other, all night trying to stay warm. And then we go to Missouri, and that's when my friend said, okay, this is the time you want to try and get into a leadership position because you could pick up rank meritoriously. Then you could come to our unit as a Lance Corporal instead of private first class.
What an advantage you have somebody kind of coaching you like that.
Oh, absolutely.
That's huge.
So as soon as I hit the deck in Missouri, I was on it. Like they're like, who wants to be the class leader? I do. And then I remember the sergeant that was in charge of us, he goes, yeah, we'll see how long you last, Grindle. And I was like, all right, well, challenge accepted, but I was nervous, And so what was tricky about that is I was a peer leading the peers. We all had the same rank on the collar.
Absolutely.
For the most part. There might have been a couple privates. I was a PFC, but you're all the same. And so...
is that by design so they can see who's a natural leader without the rank?
What, private versus
Well,
private
like
versus class?
peer leadership. Do you think that they put you in positions like that to see, or is it just how?
I think it's more so it's that delegation again. So you have your platoon leader, platoon sergeant, who's an actual sergeant or staff sergeant probably, and they only have to communicate down to one person now.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's essentially he's like the staff sergeant that's going to report to the higher command. And he's reporting down to a platoon sergeant. Only the platoon sergeant is a little lance corporal that I was.
And your same rank
Right.
as the people you're talking
Same
to.
rank.
But that's what I'm saying. I think in my mind, that's the purest measurement of leadership. Not do you have the power behind you.
Right.
It's, are you able to lead on level footing? Like when everybody's on the same footing, are you able to be a leader? I think that's in my mind. And I don't know if this is, like I said, I don't know if this would be intentional or not. If I wanted to decide like who are my leaders, I would want to see who can lead when everything's equal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really challenging for me. And I did okay. I maintained the role the whole way through, and my whole class graduated and everything like that. And but I failed as a leader, and I made some friends out of it, and I had some followers, but at the end of the day, I started carrying a lot of the responsibility to keep my platoon out of trouble, so that we could maintain our liberty on the weekends. We didn't get punished. So instead of,
You started doing the trying for them.
Right. So like we had to do field day. We had field day inspections every Friday morning. And if you failed field day, you would either have to clean that night, or you might like lose all your liberty for the weekend. And there's nothing to do in Missouri, but at the same time, if some kids want to go get tattoos or go out on the town. So it was my goal, keep these kids out of trouble, make sure they're passing their practical exams, make sure they're passing the written tests, all that. Well, before you knew it, halfway through, it's me and the other class leader who's from across the barracks. We're out there scrubbing the floors every night. And, we're
in an effort to try to maintain for them.
Right. So that was my first kind of real dose at military leadership. Like I managed to accomplish the mission, but I didn't bring everybody along.
Yeah. It's almost like failing the means. You got the end, but you failed in the means.
Yeah. And so I dealt with that as I went into the Marine Corps. Once I got to my unit, I'd go to annual training for 2 weeks at a time. We'd go do some projects in Sierra Nevada or Camp Pendleton, something like that. And again, leading peers, but that's when, the cream starts to rise to the top, and all of a sudden you have been acting in the next rank that you want to assume. And so you're like, once you get pinned and you get the next promotion, it's like, well, yeah, I'm ready. I've been doing that with the same rank on my collar. So now it's official and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think the Marine Corps designs it that way. It's just not so much in the schoolhouse.
It's kind of brilliant, honestly. Like, let someone lead at the same rank to see if they can do it. Because I know that from a completely different kind of a background, like I spent a lot of time with guys, and you see sometimes that a guy will want to like try to assume a position of leadership, and it's just instantly agreed upon non-verbally by the group of like, shut up,
Right.
just stop. Like, you almost like your heart goes out to somebody because they're trying to figure it out, and they're like, I know, maybe I'll be the leader. And then there's other people that like it's like they don't even try, and for some reason they just end up sort of. They say that like in a church setting, you have people that lead from the front row that are in, and you have people who lead from the back row that are out. They're still there, but they're trying to almost like, it's not like they have the same vision in mind, and I don't know, in the Marine Corps, I would assume there's obviously a difference of opinion and stuff like that, but do you ever have people like that it feels like they're just working to undo everything you're trying to do?
Yeah. And I could go till I'm blue in the face on that one. It's a long story, but I fought that a lot in the Marine Corps. The way that it's designed for people to get promoted and everything, it's designed so that you do have the credentials and that you have the scores and you're physically fit and blah, blah, blah. So that when you get promoted, then it's a natural thing. Like this guy earned it, he or she earned that position. But you're still going to have people that know how to work the system and everything and don't have the credentials. And then you see, mutinies and stuff like that. Or you might work alongside someone who doesn't have the credentials. You have the same rank on your collar, but there's bad blood or whatever, different motives, different ways of doing things, and they are trying to undo everything. And I dealt with that a lot. And that was one of my biggest frustrations was I kind of reached terminal velocity of what I could do as an enlisted person. So that's when I came to a decision of, okay, either I had just graduated college, and I had graduated college about a year before. And I said, all right, either I go to officer candidate school so I can have some more control and I can get things done that I want. I can get stuff pushed through because right now I'm hitting too many closed doors.
Right.
Or I can get out because my contract was up. I extended like 6 months, 5 months. And that's when I made the decision to move back here.
How old were you at that point?
So I made the decision to move back when I was 26, moved back when I was 27. Yeah. About 6 months later.
You've already said that you kind of always have the end in mind. Like it's just a natural thing that you've talked about. You're always talking about the end, even in the today. What was the end when you got here? Did you have an idea?
Oh man, no, I didn't at all. And,
just landed.
Yeah, I didn't really know, to be honest. It was kind of scary, but I just was like, I have no idea. Here's my skills. I can run heavy equipment. I've been doing that a while, and I've been in construction and stuff. And but no, I moved up here, and my life had been so structured for 6 years of the reserves and school.
Yeah.
And then it started to get weird once I graduated college. Now I had a little less structure. And then when I was still in the Marines, and then when I moved back here, it was kind of like, well, I'm all by myself, living in alfalfa with my dog. So I started working for somebody, and it was just same old
equipment stuff.
Yeah, equipment stuff. And I learned a lot about how they run heavy equipment in Central Oregon versus in SoCal. Like just
the rocks and stuff are changed everything, don't they?
Yeah, you don't dig here; you just pick rocks, But I hadn't done a lot of utility work or ponds, stuff like that. So I managed to learn just enough to get myself in trouble with my own business. So I quickly decided I no longer wanted to work for anybody, and I wanted to just work for myself. But it wasn't like I was super passionate about heavy equipment. I mean, I like it. Now I love it. I love what I do. Absolutely. But at the time it was like, this is the most viable option. I need to just give it a shot. I don't have kids. I don't have a wife. Let's let it rip and just roll the dice. Let's go for it.
Which is kind of different than what you're saying you've done up to this point. I mean, all of a sudden now it's not a plan for 10 years down the road. It's just like, let's see what we can do today.
Yeah. And
did it feel more free, or did you not like it as much living that way?
I think I liked it a lot more with the finish lines.
I go nuts without a finish line. I feel like it's hard for me to stay motivated on a daily basis unless I've got the end in mind.
Yeah.
That for me is a struggle when I just feel like I'm sort of treading water. Like I feel like that's where I get just like impossible to live around. I think if you'd ask Lacey, like I don't think she would stay married to me if I didn't have some sort of an end goal. I'm insufferable.
Yeah, I think that was a big issue too. And so even with starting my business, it was like, well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, what do I have to lose? So I didn't have a finish line for so long, and we're getting close to the Steve Stone story because that finish line didn't start to become a reality until like end of this last summer, so fall
of 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So business is going good. You go to business for yourself and it's going well, or no?
The first couple years. So I started my business, like filed my registry in June or July of 2017. So this beginning of this summer will be 3 years, but I didn't get my contractor's license and really get the business going until the following October. So this will be my third digging season, essentially. Okay. I had built a small network here. So first thing I did, as soon as I got my contractor's license, I went and got a local phone number. So people weren't like, who's this California guy calling me? And then I just started calling everybody I knew. Hey, blah, blah, blah. And came right out of the gate strong, like one big job, wham. And then slow. And so I started, my landlord showed up at my house one day and he goes, hey man, what are you doing? And I had like just finished a job and I didn't have anything. I'm like, nothing. I'm on Craigslist looking for work or, whatever.
Or some sweet deals.
Yeah. So he goes, well, do you want to come frame houses with me and some other guys? And I was like, sure. So
was there a part of you that's kind of resistant to that because it wasn't in alignment with what you had wanted to do?
Yeah.
Or you're just broke and looking for anything?
I wasn't broke yet because I did pretty good on the first job. I mean, I didn't make a year's salary by any means, but I had made a few weeks extra money.
You were going to be able to eat.
Yeah, I could eat, but it was starting to get a little dicey. So, yeah, I didn't exactly want to go back to swinging a hammer because
Right.
I knew I swung a hammer for like 2 years after college. And then I was like, but then I got in with a pretty good group, and I started to build a network through those guys. And I only worked with them for probably 3 months, just basically the winter. And I was doing snow removal, with a shovel for a couple accounts for residential stuff. So I was doing fine. And then it started to pick up. And like April came around and I had my first real digging season. And so then
And here, for people that may not be listening from Oregon, digging pretty much just stops through the winter because everything's frozen or the weather's bad or equipment operators start moving snow or whatever, right? So it's actually like April to November, something like that.
Yeah, for the smaller guys mostly. I mean, a lot of the bigger companies like Taylor Northwest, they let it rip all winter. For us, we're now in a position where, like this last winter, we had a really good winter with the weather, and we had a couple good projects, so we stayed in the dirt. But we're also positioned to where if we get ample snowfall, we can push snow too.
Sure.
But yeah, it is
Sorry, I jumped way ahead. But anyway, so I didn't mean to skip that. But so your connections through the guys with construction.
Yeah.
And then your first season is April. Would that be like April 18 or 17?
18.
Okay.
Yep.
So they start rolling at that point.
Yeah. So it starts going, but then
Also, real quick, you're single.
I am.
You live in Central Oregon. You're a young guy.
Yep.
I wouldn't say that there's not a tremendous amount of young people in Central Oregon. I mean, there are young people, but it's not like a real target-rich environment as far as somebody who's single that has any thought of starting a family. To this point, you're starting to work. Things are going good at a career level, but just at a personal level, are you? I'm asking personal questions. We don't
that's
really
all
know
right.
each other.
No, let it rip.
Like, are you still good with like socially and stuff like that? Do you feel like you're at a place where I'm going back to 18? You're busy. You're working.
Yep.
You moved to alfalfa. You and your dog.
Got it.
At a social level, what's life looking like at that point?
So it was mostly just like family oriented for who I know that already lived here, like my aunt and uncle and their kids, and then one of my sisters lives here and she has 2 kids. So a lot of weekends were spent, hanging out with them and then working 5 days a week.
People don't want to like spend their weekends with their sister and the little kids. I see what you're saying, like family's family.
Right.
But I mean, like as far as a friend group or a peer group or anything like that.
No, not at the time. My aunt and uncle lived right on the river in Bend, so that was enough entertainment for me. And then having a business, like Saturday mornings were spent getting ready for the next week kind of thing, And then on Sundays we were doing, pickleball in their backyard and a barbecue.
So it felt like a community, but
Sure, yeah. My friend group started to grow through the construction industry. So I ended up becoming like best friends with my landlord, and he is like been one of the biggest
risky
supporters.
move if you're a landlord.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. But
You don't
awesome,
want to evict
man.
one of your buddies if it comes to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been trying to buy that house from him. So Brian, if you're watching this,
There you go.
yeah.
So you start working, things start to take off in 18.
Yeah, they started to take off, and then we hit the slow season again. Coming into the winter, and
Do you do okay? Like winter here is hard for me because of how much everything slows down, stops.
yeah,
Like that's where I struggle the most. Like I'm fine if I'm busy. I'm fine if I'm working. When everything shuts down, stops, or gets cold, that's where I've just like it bothers me. Are you, when things slow down, are you excited for that? Like excited to have some downtime, or is it wear on you?
no, it wears on me. I mean, it depends on where the finish line's at again. So like with the coronavirus, that's what's bothering me the most about this whole deal. It's like it's not anymore where's the finish line. So where's the start line?
Right.
They keep pushing the start line down, kicking the can down the road. So when I wake up and I check the news and it's like, now it's April 30th, I'm like, that's what bothers me.
Right.
So
there's no definitive finish line.
Right. I like to be goal oriented and to, have a task at hand. And so,
Definitely.
So when you ask if it bothers me that things slow down, yeah. Unless I don't do well with vacation or taking time off. I mean, I like a day every once in a while to just kind of binge watch Tiger King or something like that. But
Hypothetically,
I don't really follow.
never
what
do,
everybody else does.
but we get it.
I'm just saying, Joe Exotic. So
when it slows down in 18,
yeah.
what does that look like? I mean, is it
Oh man,
happy with where you're at in life?
No, that was rough. So I get in with I get into a situation in construction, and the builder that I was contracted with didn't want to honor my contract, and things started getting weird. So I'm like, I need to get out of this situation.
How are you with conflict?
I'm legalistic. Like, I write my own contracts and stuff, which, you know, I'm sure they could use a lot of work for if an attorney was to read them. But for, you know, the common man, they're not half bad.
Yeah.
So I always try and, as a kid, my dad always said the truth will come out. And then when I was in college taking law classes, you know, I'd do like, I'm a business major, so I'd do some law classes too. And every time the professor would say, what are the facts? So I try and just break things down to what are the facts.
Solid footing, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to conflict, if I'm confident in what the facts are and the truth coming out, I can do okay. But to be honest, it was rough. I mean, that whole thing was like, I bought my first machine. I was like, oh yeah, I got work going into the winter. I'm going to make this much money. I can justify buying a machine.
Because of the contract.
Because of the contract. And I get 2 weeks in, things go sour, and I had to pull stakes and get out of there.
What was his name? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kidding. Anyway, so pull out.
Yeah. So then it was like, oh man, do I really want to do this? Is this what it looks like? Is this what, you know, the construction industry looks like? And I was like, I just need a break.
Yeah.
I can't, it really was hard. It was a hard like couple months there where it was just exhausting, you know? And so
and feeling a little bit isolated anyway, because you got your family, but as far as like, and I don't know how much of a friend group you would maintain even in like California or whatever, but I know that for me, like one of the things, if I'm around people, I do okay. As weird as that sounds, because everybody thinks I'm an introvert. I'm not. But like if I've got people at times like that, I feel like I'm all right. When I isolate myself, if I feel like I'm like on my own, that's where I start to kind of spiral.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm more of an isolationist, so I'm okay with it to an extent. You know, it's kind of like checks and balances. Once the isolation runs out and I've had enough, then, you know, I want to like fill up the family side of the balance. But I do fine with it, to be honest.
Awesome. So
yeah, but thankfully I did have, my parents had moved up, and
they got here when?
They got here that winter, so
that helps a lot, because now there's even more familiarity.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I guess, I mean, I didn't really think about it like year-wise, but I guess 2018 was kind of rough. And so then I decided, you know what, I need a break. And I had a friend whose wife was a manager at Mountain Bachelor, and I grew up snowboarding, and it's, you know, something I hadn't done. I just hadn't had fun in a while. It was just like grinding, you know, doing construction, and you're pretty blown out on the weekends from work. And so I was like, I'm going to go work part-time on the mountain and go snowboarding.
No way.
Yeah. Like, I'll take a huge pay cut, but at least I can just clear my head.
Sure.
So that was last winter. So I did it, and it was like my whole, all of the creativity came back into my brain. Like,
absolutely.
I went into the digging season with a clear head, and like,
real quick, they were saying that like China and Russia, for being as adversarial with us as they are, they said one of the things they can guarantee, I'm trying to remember who said it. I wish I would quote them. I can't remember who said it. They will never lead in innovation, because like and I've talked about this a lot, so I might be repeating myself, but if you tied someone to a tree and you pointed a gun at them and you said, come up with a good idea, that's not how you compel creativity.
Right.
Creativity has to be cultivated, and the only way you're going to cultivate innovation is through freedom. And the people who operate in a certain level of creativity or freedom thrive in a free society. So the more that you quell that in a community or in a country or in a nation, what you're going to get is really good rule followers, or people who can knock off innovation, but they're never going to be the leaders of innovation. And so what you're saying, in my mind, like that aligns so perfectly, is like when you went and operated at a certain level of freedom, innovation came back.
Absolutely. All of a sudden I found myself like doing caricature drawings, which I had never done, and thinking about the business and ambitions and everything. And so when I went into the next digging season, which would have been April of 19, I mean, it hasn't stopped since. Yeah. Right.
So now, what changed when you got back? Was it instantly things started to turn around, or was it like you just gradually started to build into to the business going as well as it did?
We started getting momentum is what it was. So I saw compounding, and I wasn't really aware of the value in, or I wasn't aware of it even existing, the idea of compounding, a compounding network and momentum.
Yeah, no,
so all
for
of a
sure.
sudden that started becoming a reality this last summer. Now,
Well, and also, like, if you're in a good headspace, people may not say you seem like you're in a good headspace, but you seem more believable. You're a more trustworthy person. Healthy people in a business are always going to succeed at a greater level, because we have this sort of, as people, we have this ability to smell something before we can necessarily describe it.
Absolutely.
And so if you're burnt out and wore down and tired or fearful or frustrated or angry, people are going to pick up on that. And they may just kind of lean away from it. And if you were to ask them, they wouldn't be able to explain it. But people pick up on if you're in a good place or not.
Right.
So to me, it makes sense. You come back, you're in a good headspace, things are going well, and all of a sudden people start to lean back in again.
True. I mean, I think like everything was going well until there was the fallout with that contractor. So I think I was in a good headspace before that. And I don't think there was a whole lot of harm into my network,
Sure.
So it was just kind of like business as usual from everybody else's perspective. Like the winter slows down and then the digging season picks back up. But what I saw was my network started to grow, and then people started calling me saying, I got your number from so-and-so and so-and-so. But then we came into the end of this summer, which is kind of where the Steve Stone thing comes in. And that was really interesting. And that's kind of where, shortly after I started speaking with you. So that was a whole nother deal.
So what was going on? Because you said you called Steve, which, I mean, literally that's a blind call. Like literally just picked up a phone and called someone you didn't know and said, I heard you on a podcast. What precipitated that phone call? Like what was going on in your life that caused you to go, yep, I'm going to do it?
Okay. So I'll take you back to, what was it? I guess it would have been December 2017. I had just started my business, and then it got slow, right? And I'm like framing houses. I'm kind of broke. Life's not going that great. Just, kind of whatever. And I did have these, when you asked earlier, was it kind of a bummer going back to swinging a hammer after starting a business? Yeah, absolutely. And so I was kind of like, what am I doing? And I went down to a wedding in the South, and I'm on this plane, and I think I've told you a little bit of this story, but I'm on this plane, fall asleep on the plane, we get in the air, a while later I wake up kind of groggy-eyed, and I look over, I think I fell asleep before we took off, and I look over, and the lady next to me is on her laptop, and it says like a journal, right? And so I was kind of into writing at one point in my life, so I go, if you don't mind me asking, what are you journalizing? And she starts telling me, oh, we're in this class in Washington, and we're going down to the seminar for this book. And I said, oh, cool. So we start talking about it, and it was Caroline Leaf's The Perfect You. So we start talking about it and everything, and I'm in a pretty bad place, like personally. I'm just, kind of down, not really feeling it. I'm broke. Going down to the South for this wedding is like on a credit card.
When you say South, where are we talking South?
Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get down there.
Which can be kind of a dangerous place to go when you're in a weird headspace, because Louisiana is a wild, wild west kind of a place.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, having grown up in Southern California and driving on the freeways down there and then going to Louisiana, I was scared for my life, and I'm in this little tiny rental car and in a place I've never been to. I'm like, well, get me out of here.
I thought I was going to die in Lake Charles at the College Rodeo one weekend. We'll talk about that when we're this over.
So I'm on the plane with these two ladies, and, I'm not really thinking much of it. And the lady says, hey, so I get up and go to the bathroom or something. I come back, and one of the ladies says, hey, we were talking about it while you were gone, and we want to give you this book. We feel like there's something really special about you and that God has a plan for you, and we just want to give it to you. And,
did that land weird, or were you at a place where you just were looking for hope?
No, where it landed was like, this is divine, and I'm afraid to open this book because I felt like it truly was a divine intervention, and I just didn't think I was ready to receive it. Like I felt like I was too stubborn at the time and just too closed off.
Okay.
Right. So I go to the wedding, get me out of the South, come back here, look at the book every once in a while, put it on the shelf, and that's where it stayed. Right. So then now we're back to end of this summer. So coming up on the end of the summer, and it starts to slow down a little bit, and I'm like, I don't have any jobs really lined up for the future, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Is this going to look like another slow?
Is there a dread that develops with you as things begin to slow down? Is there a dread of like, oh man, I'm going back into it this season of just, or are you more practical about it? Like you take that and look at it as an opportunity to develop new jobs or new outlets? Or
So at the time, I'm a little bit of both, right? But at the time, I was definitely more so looking to the negative side of it and the dread.
I struggle with it every single year when winter starts coming back. I'm like it honestly, it feels like summer flies by and winter takes 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
summers here are too quick, 4th of July to Labor Day. That's all we get.
Yeah.
So I was coming into the winter and going and had the dread going, and I was like, but that didn't really matter. So I just got to a point one day where I remember I was in a machine and I was working on a job, and I just started praying, and I said, God, I know I haven't been living my life, with you at the center. And I'm like, I don't really care about what I have or don't have. I just want to have a purpose-driven life. And that was one of the things I was missing since I left the Marine Corps. I had that accountability. I had, 23 Marines that I was in charge of, and I had all this responsibility.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's like, I'm pushing dirt and I'm, paying my bills, but I don't have any type of higher level.
The significance part.
Yeah. So I said that my prayer was just that I could live a purpose-driven life. I was just like, I'm sick of just kind of going through the motions and like looking forward to getting off work.
Right.
And I'm coming into the winter, no work. So I start making some phone calls to some networks and some of my network, and I say, hey, if you got any jobs you don't want, let me know. So this one guy sends me a picture of a phone number, and I call this guy. Boom. I land a job that sustained me from November all the way till February.
No kidding.
Off one phone call. And that was like a couple days after I prayed that prayer. So I went through a breakup at that time too, and that's what kind of spurred that prayer.
What was her name? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
If you're watching, sorry. But so I went through that breakup, and it's not a sob story by any means, but it kind of paints the picture of where I was at, like coming into a slow winter. I'm nervous about it. I go through this breakup, and it's like, and just basically just hit my knees, like I want to live a purpose-driven life, right? So God answers that prayer. He's like, watch this, and the doors just start opening, and things start happening at a level so far beyond what I would have even asked for.
There's that moment where Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he says, throw the nets on this side, remember?
Yep.
And it wasn't a spiritual, in a sense, it wasn't a spiritual moment, but they caught so much fish that Peter recognized it as being otherworldly, of like, there's a connection here, so much so that he turned to Jesus and he said, get away from me. Like, whatever you are, I'm not worthy. And it wasn't because Peter saw angels or anything that would be considered like heavenly or spiritual. He saw a practical increase that validated the supernatural aspect of who Jesus was.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was definitely something where it was like, this is a total God thing. And so I go into this next job, and I'm driving in my truck one day, and I don't normally pray out loud. And so, I'm no perfect Christian by any means, as if there were one, but, I'm driving to work, and my mom was going through something. I can't remember what. And I was talking on the phone with my uncle. He's a truck driver. And, so we wear these truck driver headsets, and I'm in my machine all day, and he's in his big rig, and we talk a lot. And he has like a totally awesome testimony. And so we pray together sometimes, and he wakes up super early, and then when I'm plowing snow in the middle of the night, he's trucking through the middle of the night. So we talk a lot.
You bet.
And it's really rekindled a relationship for us, and it's so awesome. So we're on the phone, and we're driving to work one day. I'm driving to work, and we're on the phone, and I say, actually, no, I think I was by myself. And I'm praying out loud, which I don't normally do. And so, I wasn't on the phone with him at this time. And I'm driving, and at first I was like, you're gonna look like a nerd driving around. You're gonna look crazy, like shouting out, praying,
right,
driving your truck through downtown Bend. But I just felt like I needed to pray out loud. Like I needed to make this declaration to God, like I'm coming to you as profoundly as I can within this capacity. So I was praying for my mom out loud, and then I just praying for everybody in my life. And then it comes down to me, and I go, God, thank you so much for everything you're giving me right now. But if there's something more you want me to do, just show me, and please help me not to go, maybe it was something else, or, I'm just imagining things.
Right.
And that was the day of Steve Stone.
You know what's funny we've talked about this on those podcasts. We weren't sure how we wanted to do it. So we're just kind of capturing conversations, trying to figure it out. Right. It wasn't something that we ever really published or pushed, or how you found it, to be completely honest, is miraculous, because Steve goes, yeah, I heard it on the podcast. I'm like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
He was one of the 2 down list.
Well, the way I found that podcast was, for some reason, the Shiloh Ranch recordings of the sermons weren't showing up on my podcast app on my iPhone. So then I typed in your name. Then I saw the Flatbed podcast. Then I looked through the descriptions. And then when I saw it said Steve Stone, the bassist from Casey Donahue. Like, Casey D's like one of my favorite bands next to Whiskey Myers and Cody Jinks. So I was like, all right, I'll listen to it. And what's really cool about that whole story is there was only 8 minutes left in the podcast, and I was just about to turn it off before he mentioned the BHBA
I didn't even know he was doing
Freedom
that.
Project.
Like, him and I hadn't talked in a while. And so, like, I was just calling just to chat to see if we could, like, we were learning all the equipment stuff. And then he starts going into that, and I'm like, what? Why didn't I felt bad that he had been that involved with that, and I didn't know anything about it. I was about to hang up. Like, the conversation was almost over. He's like, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how it hit me. So, I'm listening to it. I'm just about to turn, I'm running a big excavator and just kind of listening, whatever. Just about to turn it off. Usually, like, the last couple minutes of a podcast is like fluff, and catch you later. And, he goes, hey, Jordan, by the way. So I listen in. And then when he says it, I get just like a physical punch in the gut. Like, I've been touched by the Holy Spirit and could tell when God's telling me something. But this was like a physical, I'm going to throw up kind of thing. Like, whoa.
You're like, because you'd ask, like, God, don't let me miss it.
Yeah. He's like, here you go. So I shut the machine off. I took my headset off. I'm like, just rubbing my hair. Like, is this reality? Yeah. And I just started praying, and I call my mom, and my mom is like prayer warrior, man. She's got like direct line. So I call my mom, and I'm like, what do you think? She's like, when this type of thing happens, you need to pay attention, and you need to not try and dismiss it.
Right.
So I was like, roger that.
Okay.
So Google BHBA Freedom Project, some phone number, call, hello? Yeah. Hey, and it's Steve's wife. And so as I'm talking to her, a neighbor shows up on this job site, and he's like being a looky-loo, and I'm making tons of noise. I'm running a big hammer on an excavator, and I'm like, ma'am, I am so sorry, but can I call you back? And she's like, oh yeah, totally. I'm like, I am
sure.
so
I don't know who
sorry.
you are anyway.
And I'm like,
call if you want.
I'm like, here it is. Like, this is like episode of Seventh Heaven, and I'm blowing it. So I'm like, okay. So I run out. I go, hey man, how's it going? Talk shop with this guy for a while. Get back in the machine. Dial up the phone. Voicemail. And I'm like, you blew it, dude. You idiot. So I get, and I go, no way. This thing's way bigger than me.
Yeah. So
I'm just like, we're cool. So I keep running the machine. All of a sudden, a Texas number calls me, and it's Steve. And I go, man, and what's cool about Steve is he wasn't even surprised.
Right.
He was just like, yeah, that's how God works, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that was that's like kind of the big ball of wax. But one thing I forgot to mention was as all this was happening, that's when I started listening to the book by Carolyn Leaf, The Perfect You. And it really started to open up my creativity, because you no longer live under some type of stigma or label that everybody says about you, like whatever it is, like you're this, you're
materialism.
That. You have anxiety, or you have this, you have that. It's like, no, you are you, and you go through things, and you might, have suffered from certain things, but everybody does. But you don't have to live under that type of label your whole life, because that's not the way God designed it. You do have a perfect you. And once I started to conceptualize that, man, it just, everything started bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
like-
because
like it
now all
was
of a sudden their
nothing.
choice matters. That was the thing about that book that stood out to
Yeah.
me, and I haven't finished it yet, but this stood out to me is that materialism, you think of materialism as credit card debt, of trying to buy things. But the concept of materialism is that you are whatever everything about you says, your height, your weight, your ethnicity, your age, your finances, this, like that is who you are.
Right.
And what she was saying was that the root of materialism is that you are bound by what is true in your life.
Yep.
But choice says, regardless of what I see, the choices that I make begin to matter, and that the mapping in your brain, the synapses and all the things that take place when you take responsibility for your choice. I'm not a victim of my circumstances. I actually contain a power, the ability to choose, and those choices start to create new patterns and new pathways that allow freedom actually from things that used to look like bondage.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I can't change all of the details, but my choice can't be taken from me.
Well, I think one of the biggest realizations I had listening to that book was that you're wiring it in. So, you know, as a child, you don't really have a choice. Things get wired into you based off your exposure. But as you get older and you start to have that mental capacity, you make a decision on how you want to how you want to catalog things.
Yes.
And so what I love about Carolyn Leaf is she won't posit anything of science unless she can back it up with scripture and not the other way around, right? So what she does is she's teaching people about the neuroplasticity of your brain and saying you wired it in there, you can wire it out.
Yes.
So you have the
Absolutely.
physical brain and then you have the mind. So the mind controls the brain. The mind can actually change the physical brain.
Which just flies in the face of what we've been
Of modern
taught.
science, right?
Absolutely.
And healthcare. Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, it was so liberating. All of a sudden I was like,
Oh, wait a minute.
wait a minute,
I'm
I
not a slave
wired
to
this
those
in
things.
here.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I guess I could just take it out and change it. And all of a sudden, man, this burden just comes off your shoulders because you feel like you're back in the driver's seat. You're not at the the
Right.
victim of whatever is driving your life. You are driving your life, and you're making choices. And it's easier said than done. Obviously, like you get mad at somebody driving down the road, but those little things over and over compound into actual physical changes in your brain, and that's why it's a choice, right?
Yeah.
And so that's that was a huge part of that book that I loved.
So that's all happening. You call
Yeah.
Steve. Steve is working with trafficking victims.
Right.
People like Steve is wild. I cannot wait. And you guys still haven't met in person yet.
Nope.
So you called me, and I remember because Steve was kind of like, Steve's still figuring this out. Like he's still new to this. Like he has since maybe I think you know this. Like he's quit the band. You know that?
Yeah, I did.
So
see that.
he's going full time into this. You called him, and as is my understanding that Steve's kind of like, the average person who calls is going to go, hey, I want to get involved.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, do this, this, and this. And they're like, I don't want to get that involved. That's just the average response. Steve is kind of a no BS kind of a person. And so his natural answer is like, just hang tight. You know, we'll think of, I'll let you know as things begin to develop.
Right.
When is that about what the answer was at the time?
Yeah.
Because when you called me, it was kind of almost like it was because Steve had said, you got to call him. You got to call this guy. And obviously I feel the typical Jordan Weaver guilt of like, why haven't we met? But when you told me that, I was like, no. You got to call him back. He doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Like with your background. So this was the conversation was like, and tell me if I'm missing any details. Call him back and go, no, I'm going. I'm absolutely going.
Yeah.
I'm either going to go with you or I'm going to get on the same plane and I'm just going to follow you around and get on your nerves. But I'm going because he's in Belize. They just bought property. They just closed on some property. They're building basically a city so that when they get saved out of trafficking, this blows my mind that in 2020, we're so, as a society, we're so advanced. And yet there are people that are literally sex slaves.
Yeah.
That are in bondage to people that like actual real slavery is more prevalent in 2020 than in any other point in history.
Yeah. I mean, from what I've heard about Belize, and one of the things that Steve's trying to do is the problem is a lot of what they do is and I could be wrong, but from what I remember him telling me and kind of what I've seen studying their project is they kind of rehabilitate these girls. They rescue them out and, save them from that life.
And give them a choice as far as a career and things like that.
But in Belize, they didn't exactly have that. And so what was happening is they were having to let these girls go. And they would go back into the community where the sex trafficking is legal. So his goal is to give them a safe haven, teach them skills, and empower them which I know he does that in some of the other places he's gone to, but in Belize, that opportunity wasn't quite there yet.
Well, and their
So that's what
national
they're trying to
laws are
do.
weird. Like, I don't remember details. I'd get the details messed up. Steve's probably going to listen to this. But in some regard, they're protected. The traffickers are
Yep.
protected. And I don't remember exactly what law, but for some reason, there's just so much flexibility that you're not seeing people being legally held accountable for that. And so
Right.
as a result, someone gets maybe saved, like you get taken out of that lifestyle, but then you have nowhere to turn. You have nothing to protect yourself or take care of yourself. You have nobody to vouch for you or anything like that. And so what choice do you have? Now all of a sudden it's voluntary slavery because you don't really have any other option.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of that too. I don't know. That's kind of the science behind that's a topic for another day. But yeah, I mean, from what I've gathered is that Steve's trying to empower these girls by having a safe haven and teaching them skills and education so that they can have a better life. And, hopefully they will have some momentum behind themselves when they get back out into it, that they're like, I don't need to go back into that. I can make a decision, as opposed to this is kind of my only option.
Well, that's what I love about you and Steve both, is because when you called Steve back, like, no, I'm going. All of a sudden, it's like the lights came on for him. He's like, all right, let's do it. Like, instantly when he realized, oh, I'm not just dealing with some dude off the street. Like, I'm talking to somebody who has the wherewithal to know what you're signing up for. Like, and what's funny is it's kind of all on pause or hold right now.
Yeah,
but
to an extent for me.
I mean, I haven't talked to him in maybe a few weeks, but like his point was like, you're on the list. Like, when it happens in his mind, he's got Brandon Grindle in the wings.
Well, and that was the other thing too, is like, you hear about these things, right? You see it on TV or you hear about it in a church, and a lot of people, the way that they're able to reach that is by donating. It's kind of one of those things like, man, that would be cool to have. For some people, that would be cool to go be part of that, but it's untouchable. So when I saw that there was only a couple things I needed to do to potentially close the deal, that's when it was like, this is a no-brainer. Like, I've always wanted to,
Actually
be involved in something like that. So I was like, I'm not gonna squander this opportunity. So there's been a couple different little red tape things, and it's moving forward. And as far as before the coronavirus and stuff, we were looking, towards the early part of this summer that I was going to be doing something with it. Yep. So hopefully it comes about. It's been just to be thought of, considered to go on the trip is huge.
Yeah,
it's an honor. So
I mean, knowing you a little and knowing him fairly well. Like, it just, to me, it made sense. I had absolutely no hesitation about telling you, like, no, call him back. Yeah. He doesn't understand. Like, you are going to go. And of course, he's like, oh, sweet. All right, then I got it.
Yeah. And I kept bugging him after that, like, hey, how'd the gala go? Hey, how'd this go?
Right.
I didn't want to bug him, but at the same time, I was like,
don't want to fall off the radar either.
I want to, somewhat be in the back of his mind. And, kind of what the whole deal made me realize also was like, well, there's always other things you can do in your community,
to be clear, like right now you're in the arena, taking the top 6 inches off of the red sand. You're going to replace it with other dirt.
Yep.
And I couldn't believe, like, I think I told you, like, I was expecting this was going to be kind of a long drawn out thing. And you sent me a picture today. It's like, it's just a stack of sand ready to go.
Yeah, it's ready to go. We got a truck coming in tomorrow with the belly dump, so we'll be moving it into the parking lot.
I mean, to me, that's involvement. Like, that arena is such a reaching point for us in our community. That's kind of what helps fund the cattle program. That sand really did need it. Like, it needed swapped out. It did good for a while, but we felt like there's a better opportunity to put different sand. And so what's funny to me is I see what you're going to do or going to get involved with Steve, and that's awesome. But to us right now, like, that's huge. That's a huge, because we didn't know what we were going to do. We really needed somebody like you. And that was, when did that come up? Because you texted me
like
a month ago?
2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was perfect timing because we had just agreed that we wanted to do something with sand. And here's a God moment again. Like, bam, I get a text, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, there actually is something huge that we need.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's like, I mean, I have the equipment, and to be able to give back is awesome. And I guess what I'm trying to get at with that is there are so many opportunities for all of us just to help people that it just goes right under the rug. You just don't realize it sometimes how big of an impact it can make and the gratification you get from doing it.
Yeah.
I don't have a bunch of money to donate to the church, but I have some time because the coronavirus is slowing everything down, and I have the equipment.
Right.
So let's do it, you know? And I think where that's what kind of spurred that was that the Belize thing was getting put on hold. And I was kind of chomping at the bit for
do
Belize. And I was
something.
like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
what else can we do? And I was like, let's go do that.
Yeah.
So it really worked out. So, I mean, I know you're grateful for it, but honestly, it's a pleasure
Dude,
for us.
absolutely.
We're happy to be here.
How do you think the coronavirus is going to play out?
Oh, man.
What's your speculation on that?
I don't know. How many conspiracy theory rabbit holes can I go down on YouTube?
You're going to want to watch tomorrow. Like the guy that's coming on tomorrow keeps up on all the conspiracy theories.
Right.
The qualifier is like, hey, we're not saying this is what's happening. He is a fascinating dude. It is so interesting to talk to someone who is keeping up with all the current theories that could be going on. My opinion is, I think it's legit. I do. I think it's legit. I also think that people are not going to miss that opportunity to also capitalize.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's throwing it off. I think the people are like, this is all just, I think there's some validity to that. I think there are people trying to capitalize or like bend things.
They already are.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to one of my employees about it today. There is, it is the perfect storm for an election year. And it is, people are already capitalizing on it. And I think that's what's starting to become nauseating about it is you just see the typical media deal going on. And now it's like you're really having to filter through so much information and to try and kind of make your own best guesstimation. And unfortunately, being that America has a completely different socioeconomic structure than any other nation in the world, there's no way to completely pinpoint how this is going to go. So it creates this opportunity for the fear factor from the media to say, well, there's going to be 100,000 to 200,000 deaths, which at this point with the data that we have, there is no validity to that if you were to use statistics and the mortality rate.
In the dark.
But could it happen? Like, I don't know. I'm not the healthcare expert, but I'm just looking at the numbers and going, okay, this is the mortality rate of this, and this is what they're predicting, and I'm seeing a decline in X. So how are they? Where's that in the formula?
So in my mind, the purist in me says, hold on, pause on everything, pause on all the agendas, pause on, let's take what is bad, look at what is bad, because in my opinion is, if people are getting sick and dying, then what you don't want to do is get caught capitalizing over here because it's going to decrease the seriousness that people take, and then they're going to go back outside again because they're actually losing money. This is actually affecting them economically. And so the minute they catch on to like, oh, wait a minute, there is a political, it's like that smell test again, like this smells political, they're going to not take it serious. If you could just go, hey, this is the facts, this is what's happening, this is our timeline, it would be interesting to see how quickly we could kind of get past it. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think that right now they can put a timeline on it. I think for me, that's the frustrating side of it. You know, it's
well, don't you think though that the people that I'm hearing, they're like, this is all bull crap. We're going outside. This is stupid. They're saying that based on the bickering and the arguing that goes on, like kind of almost like at the, I don't know how to say it, but it's almost like politics feels so disconnected from our personal lives. They always fight about stuff. So if they're fighting about stuff, we're like, okay, well, you guys fight it out and we're going to go live our daily lives.
Yeah.
But if they're actually saying this would actually make an impact for you to stay inside for a while and just cut off contact, how do you believe it? Because it's like they've cried wolf on so many other things, whereas this one actually probably is serious. Like there actually is validity to it.
Yeah. I mean, one of my buddies, he lives down south. We were in the Marine Corps together too. And he's probably, outside my family, he's the biggest supporter of my business. Helped me buy my first trailer. We talk all the time. He's a heavy equipment guy too. He was like 1 or 2 ranks above me in the Marine Corps. And he's really smart. And we've been talking about it and, you know, kind of just our biggest concern is what if we go through these measures and they don't yield the results that they're aimed to yield, then why did we do that? Was that a good choice? And then what do we do? And I think that's the scariest part for me is as long as the start line keeps getting kicked down the road, my apprehension starts to grow of like, okay, well, how much longer are we going to do this if we don't even know that it's effective? How much longer are we going to do quarantine if we don't know?
Do you know, and this is probably a conversation for tomorrow actually, but do you know that there have been 21 million cell phone cancellations in China? Do you know this?
No.
I don't know. It's something to Google. They said that because the Chinese government runs the cell phones, we're about to get real weird. I don't know how far down this rabbit trail we're going to go.
So you're talking about like censorship.
Well, because but so much of China operates according to a cell phone. Like you pay for your bus ticket with a cell phone, you pay for this. Like commerce is all done through a cell phone. And they're saying there's some migrant workers that have left the country, or like people had second accounts and the economy suffered, and so they backed off and canceled one. But they said for 21 million cell phone packages to be canceled, they can't make
flag.
And so that's where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if we're getting the whole story or not.
So is your inclination that there's 21 million deaths, or that there's 21 million?
No, I don't think it's that, but I think it's possible that there was more going on than what we knew about. You know, all that to say, like, and that's not even to go down the conspiracy theory trail. I'm just like, I'm with you. I wish I knew what the solid footing as far as facts were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we'll ever really know. And I think, you're going to get to a point in 20 years, 30 years, where there's a Netflix documentary called COVID-19, and people are saying, everybody thought this is what's going on, and this is what, and it might not be so two major extremes, but I think there's a lot we don't know about it, and I'm not saying that the government's censoring it. I just think that it's a very fluid and dynamic situation.
I agree with that. I think that nobody really has a full grasp on it completely. But what I don't like is in times of fear, how much freedom people are willing to give up that they never get back. That part makes me nervous of like, how far is this going to go? What are they going to be from now forward, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, are we going to look back? Because like they said after 9/11, personal privacy was almost thought of as like unimportant. And they justified it as, well, this will keep you safe.
Yeah, Patriot.
The whole
Patriot
Edward Snowden
Act
thing,
yeah. I mean,
those are the kind of things in my mind, like we're going to get through the virus part. I'm curious to see what the fallout is in that stuff.
And I don't even know that that like your civil liberties is one thing, but I also think it's going to change the way of life, how we view things, how we shop, how we interact. It's going to, it might increase the amount of AI we use because now people are used to telecommuting and, whatever. I could see it changing a lot of things. Oh, we managed to like everybody stayed apart for a month. It's not that bad. We can use less employees in Walmart now and less cashiers, and it can be scan and
pushes
go.
us further into technology.
So yeah, I think it's definitely going to have lasting effects, but you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out now.
But like the church, we're seeing tremendous benefit from it. Like we see the loss, obviously there's the obvious loss, but we're seeing benefits. Like in some weird way, I feel like I'm more connected to more people now because like right now when this is done, I can go back and look at comments and see who's watching, and then like a name that sounds familiar of someone I'm supposed to know, or a face. Like maybe you see a face, you're like, oh, who is that? There is some benefit that we're seeing even in the midst of all the chaos, even at a church level. Like we can do more online than what we've been doing.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, actually. Kind of to go back to a question that you asked me earlier of, when things slow down, are the wheels turning in my brain for the next opportunity? That is one thing from an entrepreneurial perspective for me that I see it as a great opportunity. I don't know exactly which way to direct my arrows, but I'm going to throw a lot at the board right now.
Yeah, same.
And it's also opening up the creative vault in my brain instead of being like, okay, we're going to this job, blah, blah, blah. Now it's like, it's taking me back to when I started my business. All right, let's slow down. Let's kind of adjust our aim here.
Right.
And then let's figure out a way. And I tell my employees, I'm like, if we can survive through this and borderline thrive, when we get back to a regular economy, we're going to look back and go, man, I remember when it was really bad, and now, it's not, this is a lot easier now. And I've always grown, that was one thing with the Marine Corps was, I remember I would think back about the Marine Corps. Oh, I remember when I didn't get to shower for a few days. I missed 3 meals. I ate 2 meals in 5 days, and we hiked this far, and I only slept, 6 hours in 3 days, whatever it was. Now it's like, that's what I love about my experience with Marine Corps. Like I'm so grateful for my time in the Marine Corps because it's always something to bounce back on.
Yes.
And bounce things off
You're
of. You're
pulling from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've expanded your ability to derive from that.
And so I think the coronavirus, for a lot of people, if they make the choice to go on the offense during this time, they can glean a lot of perspective and go, I remember when it was so bad during that coronavirus and everything was shut down and we made it happen. We're going to make it happen now when the next thing happens.
Absolutely. Well, so here's my balance, because I'm aware that there are people in this church that are suffering. They've lost their jobs. They've lost income. They're trying to figure out how they're going to keep their head above water. I have to be careful that I don't get so optimistic about the opportunities right now that it feels like I'm not aware of the people that are suffering. Like there is a balance in my mind. Like I get that it's bad. I do understand that it's bad. For us here as a community, we're going to do what we can. We're increasing our giving 166% with the cattle program. Like we're going to do what we can right now. We're doing what we can. However, this has pushed us into things that we thought we could do, but we weren't quite ready. Anything live we've moved away from that now we're having to do. Like our presence at an online campus, like to your point, we're going to grow. The church is actually, we're already seeing it. The church is going to grow during this. And when it gets turned back on, I don't want to get so distracted by the people physically walking in the door that we abandon what we've started doing online, because there are no limits to that. There's no regional limitations to what we're able to do as far as like, I believe that the grace of God needs to be taught to people in rural communities. I think the Bible teaching needs to happen in those communities where they don't necessarily have access to like the greatest teachers, because the best communicators, generally speaking, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, the best communicators move to where there's more people. In my opinion, this is going to launch us further into the smaller communities of people who are like, I didn't know that about the word. I didn't know that about Jesus. Start to develop like biblical heritage in these communities that maybe didn't have access to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. I wouldn't be too apprehensive about it, because I think that this specific church and what you guys are doing has, a lot of power through the Lord. But what I like about what you just said is it's tough, I'll tell people about this church, or, they do this cattle project, or we're going out there and working and everything. And there's a stigma about Christian churches. And like when you talk about, growing up in Texas and going to church 4 days a week kind of thing, and you see people on the side of the road with, repent or you're going to hell. And that's what people think of.
Absolutely.
And then you think, but when you hear the story of Jesus, and that's one thing that really helped me to grow here, is your teachings of how Jesus was. Like Jesus was not like that at all.
Right.
And, he could hang out with anybody, and he loved people. And it's so simple that, that's all you have to do is try and love people. And that was a big corner that I turned this year too, was instead of, I need to do this right, or I need to go to church this many days a week, or I sinned and I did that. It was like, man, how can I just love people? And that was one of my prayers, and it definitely changed my perspective on it. And it's just like almost too simple.
Yeah. Dude, I'm telling you, that's what we get. Like, well, that doesn't seem, you feel resistance, especially from people with a church background, when you're like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. People are like, oh yeah, that's in the Bible. We know that's true. Okay, so let's set that aside. Right. What if we said that what God wants from us is to know him better, and that the result of that is that we're going to love people?
Yep.
They will know the scripture verse and agree with it, but when it's broken down into that, they're like, no, that's not all. There's also like behavioral modification and like, so I guess my point is that simplicity has to be, we have got to take it serious right now, because this is an opportunity where most rural communities do not have I'm going to say adequate, one of two things. They either need it online, and this is going to be the thing that puts them there, or they don't have online and they're not going to make it through. And if they don't make it through, and this isn't a season where because sometimes people are just tired and they're like, hey, we're just going to take a break. No problem. Whatever your choice is.
Right.
We're going to look at this, even with all the buildings that are caving into people's lives. I'm not moving away from that. I get it. But for us, we're going to move way forward right now. Right. We're going to take every opportunity we can, because this window right now will close. Yep. Eventually, people are going to go back to their community churches. They're going to go back to what they were doing. They're going to go back to their routines. People that are outside the church are going to quit asking the big existential questions that they're asking right now. We've got to take this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in times like these, regardless of the theater you're in, whether it's a church or business or personal life, it's, when you're in a herd mentality, everybody, if the house is burning and you see everybody running into it, turn around and go the other way. And the person that turns around, they're the one that didn't get burned, and they're also the one that has the vision of everything ahead of them, right? And so, I think as long as you can kind of learn to adapt and bob and weave through this time and find opportunities and seize them, and then when you get through it, you hit the brakes for a second, and then you reassess your situation and say, How can we do that? What do we move into the next lane?
The practicality is that God is love. The opposite of love is fear.
Yep.
So at a business level, at a church level, at a personal level, whatever it may be, when you refuse to give in to the fear, you're automatically more in alignment. And I'm not saying like from a mystical standpoint. What is it, doctor of mystical science?
Yeah.
Not being just practically speaking, that you look at this opportunity and you approach it with an optimism, you're more likely to get through it than if the fear overwhelms you and you start making decisions, like practical decisions based on fear. Like, no, we have to save that. We can't do that. We can't do that. Anybody that's making decisions in fear is going to barely get through the next however many months.
Yeah, and Caroline Leaf talks about that in her book. You know, am I making a decision based off love or based on fear? Because with the neuroplasticity of your brain and the mind being able to control the actual physical brain, which is proven science for anybody that's listening. You know, I'm not
Caroline Leaf.
Caroline Leaf told me.
Perfect.
Yeah, she's a very smart lady. She's a neuroscientist. But you know, so you're changing your physical brain through those. But just on a singular level, when you are faced with some type of stimulus, if you can digest it and say, is this coming from love or fear?
Absolutely.
And then is my reaction love or fear? It can make you pivot into the right direction to make the sound decision.
I could not agree with that more. I wish people, even they're like, I don't believe what you believe. Okay, fine, no problem. This is not about recruitment or like trying to get you to believe what I believe. Just ask yourself, is the decision that I'm making right now, is the core of that love or is the core of that fear? Because if the core of that is fear, you will suffer the consequences of that.
Yeah, and it's very contagious. Real quick, I was driving home one day and I was house sitting. I was babysitting a dog for my sister, and it's a border collie. And I'm driving home out in Alfalfa, and I have a black lab, and I see this black lab on Alfalfa Market Road running for its life, about to get hit by a car. And I'm like, what is this dog doing? And it's my lab. He's like 2 years old, and he's very good about staying in the house. I mean, in the gates, and it's all, you know, cross fence and everything, but he is like terrified, and I can't figure out why. And I cut off a car and cut him off, and I jump out, and his name's Gunny, and I go, Gunny, come here. And he is like, he can't even see me. He's just freaking out. And I'm like, what is your deal, man? So I throw him in my truck, and as I'm driving down my street, I see a sign spray painted on plywood, found dog. And I'm like, oh gosh. So I dial the number as I'm pulling into my driveway.
Of course it's spray paint.
Yeah, no kidding, man. So I pull into my driveway, and I'm like, where's the border collie? And the border collie's gone, and I got my dog. So I call the guy, and I go, is it a border collie? No, it's like this husky. I go, well, do his ears stick up? He goes, well, yeah, but I think he's a husky. I go, well, I'll just swing by. So I go out to this house. Sure enough, there's a guy standing out there on his like mile-long driveway with a husky on a leash. I go, nope, not mine. So
the guy was right. You're assuming he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Dang it, actually.
I was like, I didn't even know the thing was a border collie. I'm like, I don't know. It's like a spotted dog, you know. I'm a Labrador guy. So anyways, what I'm getting at is what happened was a neighbor is shooting off some large caliber rifle. The border collie got spooked, and he split. My dog, who hears those gunshots all the time, picked up on the fear of the other dog and said, we're in trouble. I need to get out too. I still don't know how he got out.
Of the border collie.
Exactly. And so that's what I'm getting back to when we're talking about love or fear, right? Fear is extremely contagious, and it takes out rationality oftentimes, and you're acting through survival, and you can't always make the most clear decisions. And so if you're able
you've got adrenaline. Adrenaline is playing more at a survival level than a rational level.
Yeah. But love is a more, you know, kind of just baseline, like organic kind of way of, it has its own organic presentation. Like it doesn't have those other connotations.
I'm going to butcher the science, but your anterior cingulate cortex is your decision maker that has the ability, when it rationally recognizes this isn't something to be afraid of. That's not a snake. It's just a stick. It begins to cool your brain down like a radiator. It begins to calm you down. And that when you think of things through the terms of, is this a loving perspective or is this a fearful perspective, that your brain, your physical, like the gray matter, begins to calm itself back down. Whereas adrenaline almost turns off you get tunnel vision. There's so much that you ignore.
Yeah, like my dog running down the street.
Literally, there's so much rational, logical things that he's ignoring because the adrenaline has pushed him to the point where he is literally just thinking survival. What does that mean? I don't know.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm seeing right now. It's not even the virus so much so as like the tunnel vision that's giving people.
Yeah.
It makes me aware of the fact that as a nation, things could someday change. We could become a nation that's not as free as we are right now. People could literally hand over their freedom someday based on a reactionary fear. And that's the part that's making me nervous. It's like, I've never seen it as possible before. Never before have I seen it as possible that our nation could suffer at a national level. This one, that's what I've seen of like, oh, you can spook people enough that they start sort of huddling together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I'm not saying that will happen.
No,
it's the first time that I've ever seen it as like, oh, that's how it would happen if it did happen.
well, and when we were talking earlier, it is the perfect storm for politics right now. People can play into the fear on both sides, you know, and they can potentially turn people into putty in their hands.
Well, this one of like, they say that North Korea, one of the reasons North Korea is so effective at governing its people is that they like incentivize tattling. So if you catch somebody doing something, you tattle on them. That's just part of the culture. So now they're policing themselves. You don't even have to have a presence everywhere because they're policing themselves so effectively. And that's what I'm seeing now is like they say 6 feet apart. Do the best you can to do 6 feet apart. Now you're seeing people who, because that's the standard recommendation, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
Anytime you see somebody that's like not playing by the rules, so to speak, people take it upon themselves. It's almost like this virtuous, you're not following the rules. You're putting everyone in danger. You're going to kill us all. Instead of rationally going like, it's almost like they take it more serious. So the people that are terrified are taking it more serious than the people who are handing down the recommendations like within reason. Like, yes, quarantine within reason.
Yeah, you come around a corner and you can't really avoid somebody,
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I do think, though, that's ingrained in us. It's just how people choose to react to it. Like, you drive down a back road on a Friday night, or let's say a Wednesday night at 12 o'clock, and there's nobody out there, and you see a stop sign. Most people are going to stop, right? Unless they know the stop sign's there. Right. They live on that road, and they don't see anybody. They probably keep going. They don't see any headlights. But people typically will do the right thing based off of what society says is and isn't okay.
Sure.
So if society starts to change the mold of what is right and wrong or what is healthy and unhealthy, then that's when you're going to see that herd mentality and you're going to see a perpetuation of that fear.
That's what I'm saying. The politicians and the media have now installed a new stop sign. This is the quarantine.
Right.
New stop sign. And it's amazing that people take that not as the practical use of the stop sign, which is stop because there's people coming. You're now seeing society almost adopting that stop sign will be the source of our solution. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's a completely different conversation. They're saying this is the recommendation, but that's coming from a person. And what you see is society is not treating like that as a suggestion from an educated person. They're seeing that as the solution, meaning if you don't stop at that stop sign, you are the reason the coronavirus is spreading. Okay. It's like, wait a minute. Keep it within reason. Yeah. Let's do what we can. Let's keep the civility, keep the common decency of like, what are we doing here? Are we leaning in? Are we trying to help each other out? Are we trying to make the world a better place? Or are you so afraid that you would justify killing someone who's not following the rule? And I guess that's all I'm saying is like, I now see where when countries do things that seem so foreign to me, I'm like, how did it get there? What scares me is I now see it as like, oh, somebody just put a stop sign and then touted the necessity for survival of that stop sign.
Right.
And people believed it.
And it takes away people's ability to just think for themselves, right?
I don't think most people honestly don't think most people want to think for themselves. They want to be given a direction. Not that they want to be controlled. I'm not saying that. But I think people are always looking for, is this right? Am I doing it right? Am I doing this right? Or am I doing that right? And as long as there are clear signs, they just kind of want to like relax, let life go back to normal. They're not looking for conflict. They just want to know what is the routine. Which is good. I mean, I think that's how you keep peace in a society, but there's a danger to mindless rule following.
Right, and that's why we have leaders, right? And the leaders are not the type of people that look for validation from somebody else. They either seek validation from God or whatever they set as a high standard for themselves, and that's what they bounce it back off of.
Absolutely. The autonomy of that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's only that's the way it's structured. So whoever's in charge of whatever situation we're in is going to, significantly influence the people's reaction.
That is why I think what we're doing right now, even in this moment right now, is important, is that you see people who are like, you're not afraid, then you're a threat. That's what's getting me right now is like, we're being told you need to be afraid.
Yeah.
And so people are like, okay, we'll be afraid. And then somebody goes like, I'm not afraid. I'll follow the rules. That person who's not afraid gets viewed as a threat. Someone who thinks for themselves has to have the ability to go, hold on, time out, time out. We can respect the rules and the suggestions because we want to see people do well.
Yeah.
Not because I'm expected to go home and be terrified in my house and tremble and shake because that's what's been told to do by somebody in a position of authority. Is that making sense?
No, I totally understand what you're saying. I think there's always going to be that kind of resistance of those that don't buy into whatever they're supposed to be buying into. Why aren't you buying into this? Everybody else is. It's not that the people who aren't afraid of the coronavirus are diminishing its threat in their own minds. Right. You know, like I feel the same way you do. I think that this is something we've never seen before. It's unprecedented, and I don't know the effects that it could have on this country. It's scary. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to
surrender to it.
Right.
Right.
But there are people who will. And that's why certain people have to step up and take charge. Right. And so we can only hope that those that step up and take charge are the right people. And I'm not saying at a presidential level, I'm talking in a society. I'm talking in your community, your family, things like that. There's always going to be people that look to the one person in the group and say, where are we going? Right. What are we going to do? And I think that it's, important that the people who have those abilities do their best to educate themselves and have a plan and, be aware of what's going on. I do try and stay educated on this whole thing, but I don't have all the answers. So I try and control what's in my
your
realm.
Scope. Yeah.
Yeah. But
don't you think that it feels like right now there's three categories. There are people who are terrified. There are the rebels who are declaring this not to be a big deal. And those are the two that are launching grenades at each other right now.
Yeah.
I would say that the majority, I hope that the majority of the people are the third category, which is, yeah, we see that it's terrifying, but we're not going to just surrender to it. But that doesn't mean that we're going to go to the streets and scream that it's not a big deal. Like I would hope that the majority of the U.S. would right now say that their third category, which is I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but I don't have to tremble. I'm just taking it as it comes, because I would like to think that's how I view almost anything in life.
Yeah, worst case scenario. I like to boil things down to worst case scenario. So like I have this weird complex where when I was a kid, or not a kid, but I was in high school and I'd leave my parents' house and I was driving at the time and I'd close the garage door. And I'd get halfway to work and I'd be like, did I close the garage door? And I would turn around. And after about 5 times turning around and coming home and the garage door was being shut, I started to think of what is the worst case scenario. If I left the garage door open, how many things could get stolen, or could my dog get out? And if that, so, I'm just admitting my lunacy to you, but what I'm getting
it's not lunacy at all. I could explain why. Finish, but I want to get back to that.
Well, what I'm getting at is that it's a survival mechanism, right? And it's a way that we interpret information and stimuli. And everyone has those different worst case scenarios. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, their worst case scenario is very light. It's like boom, instant. Like the whole world's going to burn down if X happens.
Right.
And everybody's different. And I think the people who are leaders typically, they have a lot higher threshold for that. And their worst case scenario, they can minimize it down to it. And until they see that worst case scenario starting to transpire, they're not so worried about it.
Fear is not sustainable. And what you said was, I would go back until eventually the fear that I left the garage door open, it's not sustainable. So rationally, let's lean into it. Let's see what's the worst that could happen. Like with a horse in a round pen, their driver is fear. They're a lot like people in that regard, actually. And so what you do is, if they can live with this much fear, this is how much fear they can operate in their daily lives with. Right. You increase it to the point that they go, I can't deal with this, and they will turn and face you. That's the first engagement that a horse will have generally with a trainer is, I can't live with the fear and I can't get out. So I'm going to turn and I'm going to face it. And once I've turned and faced it, what I realize is that running from something in fear is almost always worse than turning and facing it and going, okay, what's the worst? Yeah. And I think that is advice to live by, of like, it's okay to be afraid of something rationally be aware. Yeah. Like, hey, nothing about the coronavirus is eternal. Absolutely nothing. Right. So, I mean, worst. You eventually get to the point of like, this is all just a kind of at best, this is a practice for real life that begins after.
Yeah. And I think, just outside of the coronavirus, just the idea of fear is, and we were talking about earlier with thresholds, fear is, you're either operating in fear or love, and fear is so strong. I mean, it's like having an anchor tied to your ankle and getting dragged underwater. I think a lot of people don't realize it, or, on the converse of that, they're the frog in the boiling water, and they become comfortable, and their fear just allows them to continue to be comfortable. And that's one thing
that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, that's one thing that I really try to explore, when I'm thinking about my life and stuff is, what am I afraid of? And am I thinking in fear or optimism and going on the offense, right?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that I care about, that I see potentials that they have, sometimes I'll try and advise them because I believe they're acting in fear, and I'd like to see them take a more, offense approach.
Yeah. Lean into it in your mind, like exactly what you're saying. Like, you can be afraid. Everybody's afraid. But when you're constantly running with just tunnel vision, that is worse
And it's
than
not
turning and yeah, it won't last. So, yep. This has been awesome. Poor Jacob,
thanks for
he's
having
going to
me.
have his hands full on editing. We went on for a while, but
Oh,
I
did we?
appreciate it. Yeah, we'll do it again. This is easy.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. Thanks
sure.
so much. It's been an honor.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing in the arena. When you guys show up in the arena, dirt's different. This is it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.